Napoli, where love is king, when boy meets girl.
It's 1954, and you're listening to the radio. And this is what you're hearing when you wake up in the morning, the WIP Radio Philadelphia.
Rain that falls.
This is WGUS from Ording, Washington, trying to get that out of my face. It's about time for me to start talking about rock and roll, Philadelphia style, circa 1955, 1958, when it got started. We had a uniqueness back there in Philadelphia area in those days. We probably got our first rock and roll off of television. All of you know Bandstand, you know Dick Clark. Started up when? Who's the precursor to Dick Clark? Yes, there was an American Bandstand before Dick Clark. There was also another show that catapulted, came off of, and became Bandstand. The Grady and Hearst Show. They danced. It was a novelty thing. They danced to songs prior to rock and roll. And then Bandstand. And I was ready to tell you the guy's name and I just forgot, but there was another gentleman that started American Bandstand and Dick Clark replaced him. Dick Clark then took Bandstand National in '57. Prior to that, it was just local Philadelphia. We used to run home from school to watch it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sure that's where we got our first dose of bandstand rock and roll, because we were too little. You didn't have really good portable radios around. If you were the older kids, go talk to somebody probably 65, 66, 67. They had their cars, they had their radios. They really were the listeners of some of the earliest rock and roll rollers. Us baby boomers, we came in just at the perfect time to our ears and this new music that didn't really get started in 1955. One of the first rock and roll songs we probably all heard was Rock Around the Clock, because it was the theme song to the movie Blackboard Jungle. And that's about the time all of our parents started calling us juvenile delinquents, even though in 1955, most of us that I'm talking to now, class 65, 66, we were 10 years old, but we did go to see the movie. And we knew it was about us and what we were going to be, at least what I was going to be. So Blackboard Jungle, Bill Haley in the Comets, who, by the way, last performed as Bill Haley and the Whatevers. They were a country swing band. They last performed as a country swing band in Wildwood, New Jersey. Then they recorded Rock Around the Clock, and the next night, literally, they came out as Bill Haley and the Comets. Side note, my aunt Ethel, dead now, used to date Bill Haley. He spent a lot of time in the Jersey area. I got a little billboard from him. Gloucester at some bar. Anyhow, Bill Haley and the Comets, 1954, 1955. Rock and roll is just getting started. But I'm listening to the radio every morning, and those little sounds you just heard, that's the style of music that was going on circa 1954, 1955. Other areas of the country, R&B, the new R&B, which was originally called race music because it was segregated on the airways, it was starting to get airplay by Alan Freed and other disc jockeys around the country. I don't know that we had an R&B DJ until 1960 when we got Jerry Blavat, but that's getting a little ahead of myself. But rock and roll style, Philadelphia, 1954, 1955. 1955, you've got your first charted rock and roll songs. Bill Haley, Bo Diddley, 1955. Little Richard, 1955. Fats Domino, 1955. And who am I leaving out here? Yes, the great. If rock and roll didn't already have a name, we would have called it Chuck Berry. Still the latest, still the greatest. He's still performing at Blueberry Hill in St. Louis. If you ever get there, $25, you can meet the great Chuck Berry. Still some of the greatest rock and roll around. But let's talk about a little bit of that first R&B sound.
The Crows, baby, going way back there to 1953, and G.
And of course, you just heard there one of the greatest DJs of all time on any airways, any place in the world, Wolfman Jack. Died too young. But later on, stories about Wolfman Jack and his influence on us baby boomers from all over the country late at night. We'll talk about some other places in the world. So anyhow, it's 1955. The music's starting to get played. I'm 10 years old. Must-haves, you know, I don't know where I've heard those first rock and roll songs, but I'm sure they were either in the movies, The Blackboard Jungle, or Bandstand. Possibly going into my mother's room in the morning after she left on the weekend and turning that radio dial, and all of a sudden, boom, hearing Bo Diddley. Hear Chuck Berry. I don't remember that. This is not something, hey, I remember that. I don't. I'm still too young for that. It will be over the next 3 years when really things really start happening. Even with, mention another radio station that would really bring us rock and roll would be WIBG. High Lit, Joe Niagara, a guy named Stevens on the daytime show. These were the guys that slowly started getting the records put in front of them, and they'd say, hey, you got to play this. And just like some of the movies portray, you know, literally the record companies were bringing this music around, and it was foreign to these disc jockeys. None of them had even heard this stuff themselves. It's coming from all over the country. Fats Domino, Little Richard, they're coming out of the South. Chuck Berry, he's coming out of Chicago. Chuck Berry actually used to be what they called a country swing guy himself, apparently. He did not, you know, event rock and roll, but he sure played one of the hugest parts in it. Well, I'm running on 8 minutes here. This is my introduction to you people of the world that want to get a little bit of the history of rock and roll. Obviously, Philadelphia style. That's where my roots were. This music, though, was evolving all over the country. And next time, I guess we'll pick up here in 1954, 1955, give you a couple snippets here, and we'll just close you out here a little bit more G by the Crows. I can't do what Wolfman did, but I have just a good enough time here sitting in front of this screen. Still rocking and rolling at 62. My grandmom said they'll grow out of it. Grandma, I never did. This is Gus in downtown Orden, Washington, saying see you later. Bye now.